Greetings, welcome to our show, Ghosts R N.E.A.R, where we discuss various aspects of the paranormal and paranormal exploration. I am your host, Keith Johnson. With me is my co-host, Sandra Johnson.
I'm the girl with the laptop. Hello.
Yes, the laptop girl. And we are the founders of New England Anomalies Research, also known as E99. And this evening, we will be discussing the topic of demonology, rather serious topic. And we're going to go rather in depth and share some of our experiences and go through some questions and answers on this topic. So please stay with us and enjoy. Pastor, would you please identify yourself?
I am Pastor Dennis D. Kiesling, pastor of Bethany Lutheran Church in Cranston, Rhode Island.
Now, I understand that Martin Luther himself did believe in the personification of a great spirit that we refer to as the devil, as Satan. Could you elaborate on that and some of his personal beliefs?
Well, certainly it's biblical, so Luther was a Bible scholar, so he certainly, dealt with Satan, devil, Old Scratch, got a lot of names. I've never been there, but I understand if you go to the monastery where he served in Wittenberg, Germany, they will show you an ink spot, I think it's at Wittenberg, could be at Wartburg Castle, where he threw his inkwell at the devil, who was filling him at that time with sort of doubts. I think it was probably at Wartburg Castle that this happened. He had been at the center of controversy since 1517, the nailing of the 95 Theses on the door of the Castle Church, a number of debates with representatives of the Roman Catholic Church, all leading to the Diet of Worms in Germany in April 1521, where he was excommunicated. So he was at the center of all this activity, all of this time. And then, leaving Worms, there was an arranged kidnapping, and he was taken to Wartburg Castle, where he stayed for a year. Suddenly, nobody around, and doubts began to form in his mind. And the devil will say, the personification of the devil would ask him, are you the only one in Christendom who knows the true answers? And his doubts would grow at what was going on and what he was at the center of. Was he right? And he threw an inkwell at the devil. And supposedly, as I said, if you go to this place where this supposedly happened, there will be an inkwell spot there. But then the end of the story was then he looked out on the forest, and there were these clouds of smoke from the mines, and they just puffed away, and he said his doubts went away with them. Luther took the devil seriously. It's hard not to, especially those of us who lived in the previous century, the 20th century, and we didn't even have to be there at the time, but how can you explain events like Nazism or Stalinism and not believe in an evil power? I can understand, for example, Hitler being an evil man, and I don't need a devil for that. But I can't understand how an entire nation, or most of an entire nation, followed Hitler. And then I see a great evil power at work. But we don't have to go to the 20th century. We can go into the 21st century and see what's going on in the Middle East now, and genocide, and the murder in the streets, where human life is as of nothing. And I think it's pretty hard not to believe in evil, which we personify as the devil. And but Luther, his faith always won out, as I hope the faith of all Christians wins out. And he said later in life, when the devil bothered him, he would just break wind. I won't elaborate anymore on that. I think you and your listening audience knows what he meant, but and that's how he discharged the devil from his presence then. So faith, Christ was always obviously more power. It's not an equal battle, at least in the Christian view. Satan is not equal to God. God is always the one who is in control. And of course that leads to some interesting theological questions, which we won't get into now because this interview would never end. But it's not an equal matching, and Luther certainly showed that, you know, in his theology and in his life when he broke wind in the devil's face.
Some clients simply, of course, want validation. Is my home haunted? Am I really experiencing the paranormal? But some people are truly terrified and they are in need of help, and they're desperately searching for professionals to come in and help. But as we all know, you can't just call in the professional. Sometimes you get people that want to have their pet ghost. You know, I want the bad ones gone, I want the good ones to stay, and it's not that cut and dry.
Sometimes you can sort of misconstrue something that you think is a human spirit and seems very benign. Maybe after a while things sort of pick up and then the scenario becomes quite different.
Demonics tend to target children first, appearing as like their best friend or like somebody to play with, and then things just go bad. They start showing to the parents, and then just everything goes hectic. It's just a domino effect that shouldn't happen, and most of them do appear as children or adults, even though in conception a demonic spirit can't fully prevail or show itself as a full human spirit. But a little kid doesn't know that. A person doesn't know that unless they're familiar with the topic, unless they've seen it on television or somehow they have an encyclopedia of demonics with them and they're just interested in that stuff. But they don't know. They really don't.
But if a parent or guardian of a child asks to describe, the description should follow the demonic, like something's missing.
I think as far as children go, being that the demonic can be very deceptive, and the children being perceptive, being able to perceive them maybe a little bit better than we can, they might be deceived, and they might give that invitation a little bit more quickly than someone who's a little bit more skeptical or objective, or is not as open to that sort of thing. And of course, that's one of the things that the demonic is looking for, that invitation.
I would define demonology as the study of malevolent, disembodied beings that we classify as demons. We don't have more modern terminology, it's rather an archaic medieval term, but demon generally connotes a spirit that has an agenda, is unruly, mischievous to an exceeding degree, and seems to be resentful of the human race, and they create all kinds of havoc, usually centering upon a residence or a particular person. And a demonologist will study demons, their tradition, history, patterns of behavior.
Now with Sandra, I refer to her as a practicing demonologist. As you said, she doesn't really like the title, but it's her approach to the subject and dealing with clients. She's very, very courageous, but she's also very compassionate, and has done wonders with people, just being there and understanding and being through it where a lot of people would just have thrown in the towel. Children seem to be more perceptive and more open. They haven't learned to tune these things out. I mean, children are naturally innocent as far as their belief system. I mean, they still believe in the Easter Bunny, they still believe in Santa Claus, but if some spirit comes to them and is perceived by them, who's it going to pick on or try to get attention from, try to be noticed from? I noticed that in my own personal experience, some of the experiences I had when I was very, very young, I mean like 6 years old and under, that I was experiencing quite a bit of paranormal activity that I didn't really understand at the time. Now that I'm of course an adult, I don't experience near that much, even though I do go out on investigations and cases like this.
When I was younger, I started when I was a teenager. I didn't have any experiences when I was 8 years old, 6 years old. When I started investigating around the age of 14, I have seen the change. You know, there's more of a change when I did cases back then in the graveyard. You know, I feel more goosebumps because I wasn't perceptive. You know, I was to the extent because I was watching the paranormal shows, but I've never had seen anything when I started first investigating.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I was more eye-opening. Wait, what's that? You know, I had more just understanding of I'd never seen a ghost before, so I was being more perspective and more looking. And now, especially after seeing a lot of things, you know, there's times I go in a case, I do a cleansing, and nothing happens, even if there's something that happened to the clients or a paranormal investigation group.
Right.
Sometimes things don't happen.
Well, when I was growing up, I didn't have any experiences that I recognized as paranormal that were strong enough for me to remember at this point in my life. So I'm going to have to say I don't have much of an opinion on that. I haven't been around a lot of younger children, you know, with my family and friends. I haven't known that many younger children closely to have any kind of discussion with them about, you know, what they see and feel and hear and do, and, you know, who they play with when nobody's around, etc. So I really just don't have much information on it. I've only heard what I picked up, but everything that I've picked up here and there on the paranormal field falls in line with what you two have been saying. That, you know, children are more open, they're more susceptible, they're more easily deceived, they're more trusting, and they are also at an age where I think it's easier for them to do things like keep secrets as part of play, rather than without realizing the seriousness of their situation. So it's
Absolutely.
Absolutely. They're more, you know, in almost any way you look at it, children are going to be more vulnerable.
And I'd like to throw something in. I think just thinking about this topic is the mythos of a boogeyman or an imaginary friend. A lot of people don't realize is that has a lot, to a small percentage or even a mid-percentage has to do with the paranormal. A lot of people for a long time didn't understand the paranormal as today. So when sometimes it is perspective in the child's mind that they have an imaginary friend or their bunny talks to them. But you know, that's the same concept. The boogeyman also haunting the child because it's aggravatingly mad that it won't play with, it won't give it attention anymore. So I think that's the same concept of children seeing spirits as imaginary friend, and of course the boogeyman.
Would you say you've actually encountered a demonic entity?
Oh yes, I would say so. Again, we lack more clinical terminology, but there have been several cases I've investigated where people have reported a haunting and disturbing activity from an unseen source. And we have to investigate and decide if this is caused by perhaps a poltergeist, or could it be a human-generated spirit, or maybe something more sinister. And then we suspect it's demonic in nature. Yes, I have explored at least 4 cases that have turned out to be what we concluded was demonic. And it can be disturbing. There's even a sense to this. You can feel it if you're at all sensitive to these impressions. When you come to a residence that has demonic activity, there's a tingling sensation and an instinctive dread that I felt. And the hauntings I did investigate in these instances met the criteria of being demonic.
My brother Carl and I were involved in years ago in the 1980s. There was this boy who was 14 at the time, but when he was very young, a spirit attached itself to him through something, an object, a glove he picked up in a cemetery, and it appeared to him as like a crazy old man. He explained it as a crazy old man, that's how he described it, and came to his room every night, started saying, "You're mine now, I own you, you belong to me." And this spirit was very, very vindictive. And as he grew older, went into adolescence, he didn't perceive this spirit in spirit form anymore, but he did get, he started being attacked, and eventually did go under severe oppression and did wind up going into possession, demonic possession, which of course is very rare, but it did happen in this case.
In 1980, I was called into a situation to assist with the situation in Providence, Rhode Island. And the disturbing activity centered around a boy aged 14. We'll call him Lucas because that was his name. And Lucas tended to have episodes. These problems, these episodes began apparently when Lucas found a glove, a lady's glove, in a cemetery in Providence. And he picked this up, brought it home with him, and after that Lucas started to experience some form of seizure that wasn't medically diagnosed, but Lucas would seem to be taken over by an invading presence or personality. And I was asked to stay overnight where Lucas resided, and even then the folks knew I had some experience with investigating the harsher type of hauntings. I stayed overnight, and around 1 in the morning I was reclining on the couch. I was awoken by a scream, blood-curdling scream, and this proceeded from Lucas. So I fumbled to turn on the living room light, and out of Lucas's bedroom came the boy, and he was screaming and spinning around. His body was balled up in a fetal position, and he was careening, banging off the walls, spinning around in a manner that I really can't explain away as accelerated motor performance. I don't know how this was happening. I just stood transfixed for several seconds. Then Lucas jumped up on the couch where I'd been laying down and jumped up and down, and there was a wild look in his eyes, and a harsh guttural laugh proceeded from his throat. I tried to restrain him. I was my normal 200+ pounds, and Lucas bent my arms right back, pushed me off him. Then after what seemed like a long time, but it was probably only 2 minutes, Lucas came to himself, and he was obviously not staging this. He was shaken, he was panicked, he was calling for his uncle, and an expulsion was arranged. Not a full exorcism, but a procedure called expulsion. Clergy was involved. And I should mention that these people were of Spanish heritage, Hispanic from the islands, Puerto Rican and Dominican, and they have a tradition of belief in spiritualism. So this expulsion was arranged, and when it began, prayers were offered, and when we started the actual procedure, suddenly the room became silent in a way that's hard to describe. Something thick entered the air, and the floor shook as if it was an earth tremor or a truck going by, but it wasn't. And we were seated in a semicircle around the subject and an altar that had been arranged, and just my chair with me in it moved all the way back across the wall, across the floor and up against the wall at rather slow pace, it seemed. And then Lucas entered one of his episodes and seemed taken over by an entity, and holy water was poured on him and prayers offered. And after an hour of a frenzy, he seemed to come to himself, and he was better after that. He had one incident after the expulsion where his parents were driving by a church. Lucas was in the back seat, and he started to scream when they went by the church. But he seemed better after that. I think the affliction lasted for about a year, altogether close upon a year. And the expulsion apparently succeeded in driving away the entity from Lucas.
Pastor, how do you feel about the way demons and the devil are portrayed in modern media, say TV shows and modern movies?
I haven't given a lot of thought to that. Sometimes in movies I've seen, and I would guess the most famous one would be The Exorcist. I'm not sure if there's more famous movies dealing with evil and the devil than The Exorcist. That was certainly the one that affected me. And you know, it was sort of funny at the time it came out. I was a seminarian at Gettysburg Seminary. We had a program where students from Gettysburg could do their coursework, at least most of it, in Washington, D.C. at a consortium made up of Roman Catholics, Episcopalians, and Lutherans. And one of my dear friends went there and invited me down one weekend, and it was just when The Exorcist came out, and we went to see it. And after the movie, that was filmed, a large part of it, in Georgetown, and we went to all these sites where this movie had been filmed with all these images in my mind. And I always remember that when I went to my bed that night, and my friends and the Lutherans were staying in a Catholic seminary dorm, and I reached under my pillow, and my friend had put a crucifix under it to bring back all the vivid memories I already had going in my mind about that movie. How does the media, sometimes I think the media portrays evil maybe a little too comically, in one sense, that you can, sometimes you may not take it seriously.
Tell signs of looking into somebody's eyes and them just being pitch black and them trying to attack you. I don't know what it was, but I can tell you that when I was saying holy words, and even after saying holy words,
Provocation, right,
religious
yeah.
provocation, and during the deliverance, he started puking.
Wow.
And it was just something that, you know, I kind of like, holy crap, this is like,
Yeah.
I never thought I would have to deal with a possession.
Yeah.
Something that was just happened, you know, especially at a public event. You don't think it's going to happen, you're not prepared for that.
And sometimes even if there's not an actual possession or even obsession going on and it's completely psychological, you're on the spot.
You still have to.
Doing that deliverance is probably going to put this person in another state of mind, whether or not there's something paranormal involved. If you're contacted through your website or you get a referral for someone who claims that they're possessed, well then you want to suggest to this person, you know, to be evaluated, to get some psychological counseling and maybe even, you know, confer with the person that's doing the psychological counseling or therapy and get their opinion as to whether they think a deliverance might be helpful to them. But when you're on the spot like that, you're faced with, okay, this will probably help this person's state of mind, if nothing else, whether you're dealing with something demonic or whether you're not. And we sort of go with that philosophy as far as a house haunting. When we're called in, and usually when we're called in specifically, and probably you too, it's because the person feels like they're under siege or threatened and they want this thing gone. Mm-hmm. And so if we come in and we and our team find no evidence of any sort of haunting, let alone anything demonic, we're still going to offer that client a cleansing or clearing of their home.
Can I ask, I was under the impression that a cleansing done with the right intentions was never a bad idea. Like it wouldn't stir the pot if it's like done right.
If it's done properly. And of course, there is some level of provocation involved, but I mean, you're just going from room to room, and you're not just expelling negative forces. What you're doing is bringing in positive vibrations. You're using prayers. You're
Never
saying,
leave a void.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. You're just closing these doors and doing it as positive as possible. Now, on the other hand, if there is definite or really, let's say, rather conclusive evidence that there is negative paranormal activity taking place, then it's a different story, and you can take a somewhat different approach. But to actually get that level of paranormal activity going on, that it's very rare that we're going to actually go in and see these things happening, this kind of phenomena.
Can I ask you though, what kind of signs do you look for to set apart a regular haunting from demonic?
There can be telltale signs such as numerical, things coming in threes, or divisible by 9, say, things going counterclockwise, something that has begun on the cycle of the full moon, concluding or escalating on the new moon, different things like this, but that's usually in retrospect. Usually you look back and you see what's going on, you add up all this phenomena that's going on, but again, that's very, very rare, and it can be very, very subtle. Now,
A reaction to religious
Yeah,
provocation.
exactly,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
exactly.
definitely.
Now,
I'm
yeah.
melting.
Well, yeah, right, exactly, exactly. You know, we have been in situations where we have been doing prayers or just suggesting prayer as a matter of protection, and mayhem starts up all of a sudden. But that, you know, we know that's extremely rare for that to happen. It does happen, but yeah, that's the signs we look for. Some people will say they suddenly feel there's a presence, and you know, they feel they're being watched, though they feel a cold spot, and that can be very suggestible too. But we are bringing a level of hopefully comfort and closure to these families when it is a family situation that we go into. Certainly, if somebody's being targeted, if somebody's being personally targeted rather than somebody, say a family feels that there's something in their home that's maybe of a paranormal nature, they may have a spirit in their home, these objects are moving, things are happening, they really feel uncomfortable there. If it's demonic, it's going to be, the family will be affected, but it's going to be one person in particular that will be targeted, that will be zeroed in on, and it's a brainwashing technique. That's essentially what it is. The demonic spirit is trying to break down that person's will, break down that person's psyche, and it is the antithesis of anything that is positive, loving, kind, life-giving. It will just be totally negative, and it will slam right at that person. And you'll get these other phenomena, such as you know, things going counterclockwise, the 3 knocks, which is a demonic calling card.
And hopefully that there are those other extraneous
Yes.
clues, because I think it's one of the biggest challenges for people who are involved in this sort of ministry or going into situations where there's a malevolent haunting, that a lot of the time the person is isolated and they're the only person in the home that is experiencing something. So are we looking at someone who is mentally ill and having hallucinations, this sort of thing, hearing voices, schizophrenia, that sort of thing? Or is this person simply being targeted by the demonic and isolated? I think that's the biggest challenge for people who deal with malevolent or demonic hauntings, is to sort of tease apart, you know,